The Chicago Bulls dynasty of the 1990s was utter dominance. Michael Jordan's unmatched killer instinct, Scottie Pippen's defensive brilliance, and the banners that now hang in the United Center. But behind those championships, behind those iconic moments, the Gatorade commercials and the hero worship, there's another story. A story about conflict, control, and the price of playing alongside the greatest competitor in basketball history. One of the most fascinating windows into that reality came from a man who was right in the middle of it all, Horace Grant. Grant's time alongside Michael Jordan produced 3 NBA championships and some of the best basketball of his career. But according to Horace himself, those years came with a cost, and that cost was dealing with Michael Jordan's intense and often brutal leadership style.
And he told me, Skip, he said, Mike, this is the way Mike was. If you did not confront Mike, he would ride you every day, all the time. He said you had to stand up for yourself. He said really the only person that Mike didn't do that to was you know who, and the guy you know who is number 34, Charles Oakley. He said, but he had a problem. He said, I didn't have a problem with Mike the player. I just had a problem with Mike trying to motivate me to get me to do my job.
That one sentence, how he tried to motivate me, says a lot. Because Jordan's definition of motivation wasn't encouragement and it wasn't coaching. It was confrontation. It was about exposing weakness, breaking you down, and seeing whether you could survive the fire. Let's rewind for a moment to understand why Horace Grant's words might carry so much weight. When he entered the league in 1987, he was a young athletic forward coming out of Clemson, a player known for his defense, rebounding, and energy. But Chicago wasn't a place for gradual growth. By his second season, Grant was a full-time starter, averaging 12 points and nearly 9 rebounds while shooting over 50% from the floor. He became the Bulls' third option behind Jordan and Pippen, and by 1991, he was an essential piece of Chicago's first championship run. The Bulls finally overcame the Detroit Pistons, the bad boys who had bullied them out of the playoffs for 3 straight years. They swept Detroit in the Eastern Conference Finals, then took down Magic Johnson's Lakers in the NBA Finals. That season changed everything for Jordan and for Grant. Chicago had officially arrived. But success didn't erase the tension. If anything, it magnified it. For Jordan, every practice, every possession, every drill was life or death. He didn't just want to win, he needed to win. And if you couldn't match that energy, he made sure everyone knew it. According to Grant, he became one of Jordan's favorite targets. One story that has resurfaced during The Last Dance and has lived on in basketball folklore is when Jordan reportedly took away Grant's meal on a team plane after a bad game. Whether exaggerated or not, the story captures a truth about the dynamic. Jordan wasn't just demanding a teammate, he was a tormentor if he felt you weren't locked in. To Horace, this wasn't leadership, it was humiliation. And that's where relationships get fractured. Grant told Shannon Sharpe that Jordan's way of motivating people crossed the line. He said, I had no problem with Mike the player, I had a problem with how he tried to motivate me. For Jordan, leadership was about testing limits, seeing who would take the pressure and who would fold. For Grant, it was about mutual respect and equality. Scottie Pippen later explained that dynamic perfectly. He said it was more of a problem with him and Horace. Horace and Michael didn't really see eye to eye. Horace was a twin, so he believed in everything being equal. That's a fascinating insight from Pippen. Horace came from a background where teamwork and fairness were fundamental, but Jordan lived by hierarchy. You earn respect, it's never given. During their run together, Horace Grant was one of the most reliable players on that team. He averaged double figures in points and at least 8 rebounds for 6 straight seasons, shot over 50% from the field in 7 of those years, and even made the All-Star team in 1994 after Jordan's first retirement. He was consistent, durable, and did all the dirty work: defense, rebounding, screens, the things that make championship teams function. But none of that insulated him from Jordan's wrath. Why? Because to Jordan, consistency wasn't just statistical, it was mental. You couldn't take a play off, a quarter off, or even a moment off. Jordan expected the same intensity from teammates that he demanded from himself. Luke Longley, another Bulls teammate, once described it as relentless. If you had a good first half and a bad second half, Jordan would let you know in front of everybody.
The first quarter ends. Luke has 12 points, 4 blocks, and 4 rebounds. And I go to Luke, I say, that's how you play, man. You do that, we dominate. We up by 16. We're killing them in their building. At the end of the game, Luke had 12 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 blocks. And I just looked at Luke and I said, you know what, Luke? That is the last time I'm going to give you a compliment in the middle of the game.
That was his way of making sure nobody got comfortable. For players like Horace Grant, who always already self-motivated himself, that constant antagonism wasn't inspiring, it was exhausting. But here's the paradox. It worked. The Bulls won. Over 9 seasons, Chicago won 67% of their regular season games with Grant on the roster, and went 60-20 or better 3 times. They became one of the most dominant teams in NBA history. Behind the laughter, the celebrations, and the champagne, there was always that tension, competition on top of competition, players sharpening each other under Jordan's glare. This raises a bigger question. Can greatness exist without conflict? Could the Bulls have achieved the same level of success if Jordan were a more nurturing leader? That's a debate that has divided players, fans, and psychologists for decades. On one side, Jordan supporters argue that his intensity was essential, that pushing his players to the brink forged them into champions. They point to the results, 6 championships, 2 three-peats, and a global legacy that still defines the sport. On the other side, players like Horace Grant, Scott Burrell, and even Steve Kerr, who famously got punched by Jordan in practice, tell a different story. They suggest that Jordan's leadership wasn't just tough love, it was emotional warfare. And while it produced rings, it also left scars. We saw that vividly after The Last Dance aired in 2020. The documentary reignited old wounds. Players who once shared the court with Jordan came forward, frustrated by how they were portrayed. Grant, in particular, took issue with the way the documentary framed him. He accused Jordan of controlling the narrative as using The Last Dance as Michael Jordan's own production. Grant said, "If MJ has a grudge with me, let's settle it like men. Let's talk about it, or we can settle it another way." That's a strong statement, especially coming decades after they played together. It shows that even after all this time, the tension between them still lingers. Grant also defended himself against Jordan's claims that he was a source of leaks to Sam Smith's The Jordan Rules book, and exposed behind-the-scenes drama of the Bulls' first championship years. Grant denied it, saying multiple players spoke to Smith, and that Jordan unfairly signaled him out. Again, it shows how Jordan's approach, his obsession with loyalty, control, and respect, didn't just shape his relationships on the court, but also off them. To be in Jordan's circle, you had to accept his dominance. Step out of line and you became an enemy. But here's what makes Horace Grant's story so compelling. He wasn't weak. He stood up to Jordan. He didn't hold back. In his own words, you had to stand up for yourself, and that's exactly what he did. He confronted Jordan when necessary. He took the criticism, and he still played his role to perfection. In the process, he proved something profound. You could be both a victim of Jordan's intensity and a beneficiary of it. Because despite their conflicts, the results spoke for themselves. 3 championships, a defensive cornerstone on a dynasty, a career that earned him respect throughout the league. It's easy to criticize Jordan's leadership style from the outside, but for players like Grant, it was survival. If you weren't mentally tough, you were gone. Jordan demanded everything and then more. That pressure creates fractures, yes, but it also creates diamonds. Still, we can't ignore the aftermath. Many of Jordan's closest teammates from those years, Grant, Pippen, even Oakley and Rodman, have complicated relationships with him today. The Last Dance didn't heal those wounds, it reopened them. It reminded the world that while Jordan was the greatest winner of his generation, he was not the easiest man to follow. There's an interesting parallel here to modern basketball. In today's NBA, leadership looks very different. Players like Steph Curry, Nikola Jokic, and Giannis Antetokounmpo lead by inclusion, by empowering teammates rather than intimidating them. The game has evolved, not just on the court, but in how the stars set the tone. So it's worth asking, would Jordan's approach even work in today's NBA? Could you imagine a player calling out teammates publicly, berating them at practice, or snatching food after a bad game? In an era where social media amplifies everything, that kind of behavior would probably implode a locker room. But in the 1990s, it was accepted and almost celebrated. That's part of what makes Jordan's leadership both fascinating and controversial. Even after all the conflict, what's undeniable is that the Bulls were ultra successful. Despite strained relationships, bruised egos, and fractured friendships, they achieved something rare, sustained greatness. The Bulls didn't just win, they dominated. And maybe that's the most paradoxical part of this all. The tension didn't destroy them, it fueled them. Jordan's constant pressure forced players to find another gear, to rise above comfort, to play angry, to prove themselves every night. And for players like Horace Grant, it built character, even if it built resentment too. Looking back now, the story of Horace Grant and Michael Jordan is more than a feud between two former teammates. It's a reflection of what greatness demands. It asks us a question on whether success is worth the sacrifice, whether the rings justify the pain. Because yes, Jordan's leadership worked. It produced results that will never be forgotten, but it also left behind a trail of tension, fractured relationships, and emotional bruises that still echo decades later. So maybe the truth is this: Michael Jordan wasn't just testing his teammates, he was testing the limits of human nature. Could you take his pressure and still perform? Could you handle his criticism and still trust him? For Horace Grant, the answer was complicated. He didn't like how Jordan motivated him. He didn't appreciate being targeted, but he also didn't fold. He stood tall, played his role, and became a champion. That's the paradox of the Bulls' dynasty. They were built on greatness, but also on conflict. And maybe that's what made them so special. Because in the end, the Chicago Bulls weren't just a team that won, they were a team that survived Michael Jordan. And in doing so, they helped build a legacy that still defines what it means to chase perfection in the NBA today. The banners, the trophies, the parades, those are the rewards. But the real story, the human story, is what it took to get there. And for Horace Grant, that story was about standing up to the greatest of all time and walking away with both rings and scars to prove it. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. I'm Damian Peters, this is Basketball Network, and we'll see you in the next one.